Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Governor. Thank you for taking the time. You've been speaking with families all week. Could you give us an update on how they're doing?
I mean, it's as you can imagine, as we all think about how it's the worst thing any parent could ever imagine. And we have 3 families who lost their child. I've connected with and met with some of the patients in the hospital and their families. And it's really heavy and it's really hard. And I'm just trying to do whatever we can to support these families as they confront the most unimaginable circumstances.
Something that struck me the last couple of days is the 2 times I've seen you kind of your voice breaking when you're addressing the public has been in this experience and with Oxford. What's been kind of going through your mind the last couple of days?
I can't help but think of the parents who are mourning the loss of their children. I mean, I could start crying right now thinking about it. And yet I've got to keep it together because people need to know we're going to get through this and we're going to support the families and we're going to take action to do what we can to, mitigate the likelihood this ever happens again. But I think in these moments, the reason I do this work is because I love people and I want to support and help people. And there's very little any of us can do to lighten the burden that these families carry right now. And it's really, I think, just showing up and doing everything that we can to honor the lives that their children led and to do our best to make sure that we prevent other families from going through what they're all experiencing.
When you speak with these families, obviously we know that the most likely shooter in this case, he took in this way what was the coward's way out. So there's no way to hold him accountable. But for these families, what does justice look like for them at this point?
Each family is going to walk their own path, and it's hard for me to say from this vantage point, but I can tell you that one of the victims in the hospital let me know, number one, a classmate of his took off their shirt and pressed on his wounds to keep him from bleeding out. And he was grateful and proud to be a Spartan. And it told me he's going to dedicate his life to teaching and to fighting gun violence. One of the grieving parents said when they are ready, they want my support to do what we can to end gun violence. And so I just share that with you because I think coming from this experience, it's going to be important that we not just think about it and pray about it, but that we take action. And I'm bowled over by their conviction about how to spend their energy in the coming days, weeks, and years. And I want to partner and do what I can to support them.
That's something that Democrats have spoken about the last couple of days is these priorities that they've had on their priority list for so long, and now bringing them to the table once again. Do you think that's just a starting point, or do you see further action being taken on this?
Well, I've been trying to get our legislature to pass background checks and extreme risk protection orders, secure storage for years. And this new legislature is committed to making progress on this. And so I'm heartened by that. I'll say this too. Florida and Indiana and Virginia can do these things. We can and should in Michigan as well. They've been proven to mitigate. I don't know, that that's all we should do, but I think that is a legitimate and important start. And I'm grateful that there are so many gun owners who are reaching out and they've had enough as well, and they support these measures. And so I do think that we're going to be able to make some progress in this space.
Of course, right now, Democrats have the majority for the first time since you've been governor and longer than that even. But yesterday we saw senators calling for Republican support on this as well. Do you think it's important to have Republicans stand up here and support these things, by being a bill sponsor or even just speaking in support of it?
I'd welcome bipartisan support. I don't have any idea about the political affiliations of all the families that are grappling with the aftermath of this most recent shooting or the shooting in Oxford. And frankly, the politics of the individuals don't matter to me. What matters to me is that we make sure that we do what we can to keep people safe. And the survivors of the Oxford shooting have been calling for some of these measures. Again, this isn't about politics. This isn't about Democrats or Republicans. It's about trying to make sure that people are safe in their places of worship, in their schools, in their communities. And I'll make a seat at the table for anyone who wants to lend their voice to making Michigan a safer state.
You mentioned Michigan being a safer state, and unfortunately, we've had to go through now 2 mass school shootings in the last 15 months. I can't think of another state that's had to go through that. So how does the state of Michigan recover from that? And how do you lead us to that recovery as governor?
No, I think, when I spoke at the vigil the other night, I think like what Coach Izzo said, we got to lean on one another. We got to give each other support. Even in the most horrible circumstances, you can see the light, right, from that student who saved his classmate who was shot, to the doctors and nurses who rushed to Sparrow. They didn't have to call and ask for anyone to come in. They were actually turning away medical professionals because they had so many who showed up. To the people who traveled from across the state or even other states with their therapy dogs who were at the vigil the other night. I mean, there are a lot of folks who are here to help to make sure that Michigan's safer, to attend to the PTSD that so many are going to continue to struggle with. Then I think if we lean on one another and we lock arms and do what we can do, I think we'll all be better off.
We have time for one last question, Rachel.
Perfect. Kind of along the lines of what you're just speaking out. I know a lot of people are looking for something good to hold on to right now. What have you seen in the last week that's been sticking with you, that's kind of lifted your spirits during this time?
I think that story about the medical professionals rushing to Sparrow Hospital, the law enforcement officers and first responders who came from all over the state to East Lansing in the midst of the active shooter, fears and horror that played out, to the student who so smartly jumped into action and attended to his classmates' critical situation. So there are moments where you can see the good in humanity, even in the midst of seeing the worst in humanity play out on this campus. We will get through this. We will continue to do what we can to mitigate the likelihood of this ever happening again. But in this moment, the most important thing is attending to the needs of the families who are grieving, those who are recovering from their wounds, and a community that is reeling from this horrifying thing that played out.